I remember the smell of palm oil and smoke long before I learned to fear either. Our village stood where the red road met the river, the trees bending down to drink. We rose with the herons, weaved baskets, and pressed oil until our hands shone. At dusk, we sang as we pulled in the nets, fish flashing like bits of glass in the dark water. Traders came with salt and copper, bracelets that clinked like tiny bells. They brought news of the coast, stories of men with beards, of ships with wings of cloth. We laughed at such talk. How could anyone sail a house across the sea? The world, we thought, would always remain as we knew it. Then the stories grew teeth. Travellers whispered that those men with beards took more than they paid for. They said some who went to trade did not return, and others came back thin and hollow-eyed, speaking little. Elders repeated the words of our king, how he had written to the ruler across the sea, begging him to end the theft of free men. Yet people still vanished on the roads, or in the forests, or while fetching water. The letters were prayers no one answered. Even the river, once clear, now seemed to murmur warnings under its breath. We began to sleep lightly. The men took turns watching from the gate, their spears laid across their knees. Children learned the hidden paths through the reeds. We told them that if the drums spoke at night, they must run toward the hills and not look back. Then new traders came, men wearing carved amulets and smiles too quick to fade. They asked how many lived in our village, how far to the next town, how strong our warriors were. They promised iron, cloth, salt, anything we wished. Yet their eyes never rested on the goods, only on our faces. When they left, the air felt wrong, as if the sun itself had turned away. The raid came before dawn, when the sky was still grey and the birds were silent. The dogs started first, their cries cutting through the fog. Then came the drums from the outer fields, 3 quick beats, then silence, the signal for strangers in number. My mother shook me awake. Smoke drifted through the thatch, and between the houses I saw figures running. Some wore the patterns of inland clans, others had pale cloth wrapped around their heads and carried sticks that spat fire. One of those sticks roared, and the sound tore the morning apart. I saw a man I knew drop where he stood, and all around him the world seemed to shatter. I ran toward the shrines, thinking the trees would hide me, but 2 men caught me before I reached them. Their faces were streaked black and red, ropes looped at their waists. One struck my legs from under me, another tied my wrists so tight my hands went numb. The rope bit like teeth. I was dragged toward the square where others were already gathered. Men, women, children, all herded like goats. The bearded strangers stood behind the raiders, speaking through a man who wore our cloth, but not our shame. When someone resisted, they struck him down. When someone pleaded, they laughed, they pointed, and the ropes moved again. The sun rose, and with it came the counting. The man with the slate touched heads and made marks beside each one, as if we were grain measured for sale. A child cried for her mother. A blow silenced her. The bearded men spoke softly, their translator nodding. I saw one of them pull a small cross from his neck, kiss it, then raise his hand to signal another beating. Behind us, the houses burned one by one, the air thick with ash and the smell of cooking yam. A goat ran in circles, dragging a broken rope. I could not tell if I was breathing or only shaking. They forced us onto the red road before the sun reached its height. We walked in lines, tied wrist to wrist, neck to neck. The ropes creaked like vines drying in the heat. I looked back once and saw smoke standing where our village had been, the great fig tree at the centre burning from its roots. The drums had stopped. Only the wind carried their echo. I tried to remember the song my father used to hum when he paddled the canoe. but the words slipped away. All I could taste was dust. By nightfall we reached the edge of the forest where the path split toward the coast. They made us sit in rows while the guards shared food and drink. I thought of the river, of how its current had always pulled westward, never asking where it ended. Now I was following that same pull, bound not by choice but by rope. Somewhere beyond the dark, the sea waited, vast, silent and hungry. I closed my eyes and listened to the insects hum around us. The world had not gone silent, but it no longer spoke in a tongue I knew. The march to the coast lasted many suns. We moved through forests that grew thinner with each day, the trees giving way to dry grass that cut our legs. Some who had been struck in the raid began to stumble, their wounds crawling with flies. When they fell, the guards did not slow. One blow, a silence, then the sound of dragging. I saw a woman's bundle split open and the gourd inside spill its water into the dust. She bent to catch it and was struck across the back. We learned to look ahead and nowhere else. Each night they tied us ankle to ankle, a single rope looping through all, so that even in dreams we could not turn without feeling another's weight. The first time I saw the sea, I thought it was the sky fallen to the earth. It stretched without end, flashing silver and blue, and the smell of it burned my nose. At the edge stood the ships, monsters of wood and cloth, ribs as tall as trees, bellies black with tar. The traders called them navios. Their decks were alive with men shouting in a tongue of grinding stones. I had heard of them from the storytellers, but no telling had prepared me for the sight. The crosses carved on their masts, the guns glinting like eyes, the ropes thicker than a man's arm. Some of us fell to our knees. Others tried to run, but the shore was fenced with spears. Behind us the forest, before us the water. Nowhere left that was ours. They herded us into a stockade made of palm trunks. Inside the air stank of fear and filth. Men from other villages were already there, some with brands burned on their shoulders, others shaved bald so that they could not hide among free people. We were divided by sex and age. A man who spoke a little of the white men's language told us they would soon choose those who would cross the water. He said it as if it were a blessing, but his eyes were hollow. At night we heard the guards laughing, dice clicking on a board, and the cry of the waves like an endless drum. Each morning more captives arrived until the pen groaned like a cage of animals. When the buyers came, they wore wide hats and perfumed coats. They walked between us, pressing their fingers into our arms, forcing open mouths to look at teeth. One poured water down my back to see how my muscles moved. Another tapped his cane against my ribs and nodded. The translator called my name from a list I had never seen. I was pulled from the group, wrists bound tighter, and made to stand with 50 others. Those left behind stared as if looking through smoke. Some begged to be taken with their kin, others cursed the sky. The buyers counted out weights of iron and rolls of cloth to the inland men who had sold us, then waved us toward the water as if closing a trade for cattle. At the shoreline stood a long wooden boat. They called it a batel, a thing meant to carry us from land to ship. We were ordered to climb in pairs, the sea cold around our legs. I had never felt water that moved with such force. It lifted the boat and dropped it like the breath of some sleeping beast. The guards rowed hard, shouting at each wave. When we reached the great ship, a ladder of rope hung down its side, slick with tar. Those ahead of me slipped, and the guards beat them back up. The sky spun as I climbed. The smell of salt and rot filled my mouth. When I reached the deck, a man with a white beard marked my chest with red paint and shoved me below, through a hole no wider than a doorway. Darkness swallowed us. The hold was low and stifling, the air thick as stew. We were packed shoulder to shoulder, chained in pairs. The boards sweated with seawater. Somewhere near the stern, a child whimpered until the sound faded. A man beside me began to pray in a tongue I did not know. Another whispered answers to a god neither of us had ever met. I tried to imagine the village at dusk, the smoke curling above the roofs, the call of the river birds, but even memory seemed to have gone blind. All I could hear was the slow creak of the ship as it rocked on the tide, like a giant drawing breath before it plunged. When the hatch opened again, the sky was already red with evening. The overseers poured buckets of water over us, not for mercy but to keep us from dying too soon. One of them laughed and said something about goods and price. I understood then that we were not to be ransomed, not to be traded back, but carried across that endless sea to a place none of us could name. As the ship began to move, I pressed my forehead to the wood and felt it tremble. The land was still near enough to smell, and I tried to drink it in one last time. The dust, the smoke, the faint echo of drums, before the wind carried it away. The ship's heart woke before the sun. Ropes groaned, pulleys clicked, and the deck above us thudded like heavy footsteps in a dream. They drove us up in small groups, iron clinking at our ankles. Salt wind slapped my face. The shore lay thin and far, a brown line under a sky the colour of wet stone. The men shouted in their tongue, and the sails bellied with a sound like a beast drawing breath. Someone near me began a prayer, and others answered, each in a different rhythm, as if we were stitching our voices together to make one cloth. They set us in rows along the deck and forced food into our hands, dry meal that stuck to the tongue, a few mouthfuls of water from a wooden cup. The overseer counted as we swallowed. He wanted the numbers to live. Down the coast the waves broke white on sandbars, and the ship lurched as if stepping across a hidden ditch. The sailors laughed when a breaker slapped the bow and drenched us. I tasted the sea and could not spit it out. Behind my ribs, fear moved like a second pulse, quick and tireless. When the sun rose higher, the heat thickened and the wood beneath our feet burned the soles. They made us stamp and bend our knees to keep the blood from sleeping, shouting a beat with sticks against the rail. Those who lagged were struck. A boy fainted beside me. I lifted his head and the guard kicked my wrist away. The boy woke with a gasp like drowning, and I learned that breath can be a rope that others throw to you, even when their hands are tied. The sea opened wider. The land frayed into islands, then threads, then nothing. Clouds came and went. We were driven below and hauled up again, as if we were baskets in a market, stored, shown, stored. In the hold the air thickened until each breath felt borrowed. Sweat ran into cuts and turned to fire. At night the boards creaked like a tired animal, and the water slapped the hull with a slow, stubborn hand. A man near the stern coughed without stopping. In the dark someone passed him their share of water. He pressed the cup to his lips and could not lift it. By dawn he was still. The chain at his ankle tugged softly when the ship rolled. They brought us up to wash the deck and washed us with it. Buckets flung hard so the water struck like blows. The dead man was carried aft, a cloth thrown over his face. The sailors spoke a few quick words none of us understood. One made the sign of his small god in the air. The body slid into the water and vanished. A woman began to wail in a voice so thin it seemed to pass through the wood and into the sea. The guard lifted his stick and then lowered it again. Even iron listens sometimes when grief speaks plainly. Days lost their names. The sun climbed and fell. The moon tore itself from the horizon and stitched a path across black water. Sometimes the wind died and the sails hung like empty skins. Sometimes it rose in a white rage and the ship fled before it, the ropes screaming. I tried to measure time by hunger and found both were endless. Yet the mind learns strange mercies, a scrap of song caught and passed along the hold, a palm scar that matched my own, a whisper of a river's name repeated until it felt warm in the mouth. We shared these small fires and guarded them like coals. One morning the sea changed colour, darker and colder. The sailors moved with a new caution, peering at a chart as if it were the face of a god. I could not read their marks, but I knew the meaning. We had crossed some hidden mouth in the world, and the land that knew our names had closed its lips behind us. I pressed my forehead to the timber and tried to breathe the smell of home from it. Smoke, cassava, the muddy sweetness after rain, but only salt came back. Still I kept the memory bright, as a man keeps a spark under ash. If I must carry this ship inside my days, I will carry the river too. If they have taken my road, I will make another from my breath, step by step, word by word, until my name remembers me.